No, the act of registering would trigger the provision. It's after the fact. People would. I mean,
But you've always, but understand, when you register to vote, one of the things you're declaring is that you are a citizen of Ohio. That's
Right.
always been true. I don't think anybody's suggesting that you should be able to be a resident of Ohio and vote and then not have the responsibilities of a resident of the state of Ohio. All that I read that this does is establishes a date by which you have to do it. It doesn't change the law or the rules. It just gives you a time frame for which you have to comply. And that's not, I don't know what I've not been part of that debate. I don't know what the right terminology is or the right time frame is, but if you're going to register to vote, you should have the responsibilities of being an Ohioan.
Yeah, the Senate caucus people I talked to earlier today were saying something similar, that the statute as it exists now doesn't set a hard, fast date. It says when you become a resident, you need to change your license over.
So it says you have to. It already says you have to be one. This just puts a time frame in there. But understand, I could make just as many arguments about why having a driver's license, requiring you to get a driver's license, is actually going to register more voters.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you know you have to do this, then you have to go get a driver's license. And what happens in every government office where you get a driver's license? They ask you if you want to register to vote. In advocating for online voter registration, what is the one thing you need to have to register to vote? A driver's license number. So everything that we're doing to build access in the voting process, a driver's license makes that easier, not harder. And so you could just as easily argue that this provision will end up registering more of those people than it otherwise would have.
Aren't we talking about we're talking about out-of-state college students who, it's my understanding, don't normally get Ohio's driver's licenses. They're here, 9 months out of the year. But if I understand court precedent correctly, they're still allowed to vote here. So it sounds like you have no problem with requiring out-of-state college students to register as Ohio residents and get Ohio driver's licenses. Even though you're saying it doesn't have to do with
I'm
voting.
not part of the BMV discussion of this. I'm just saying that you can use a driver's license, the last 4 digits of your social security number, all of those kinds of things to register to vote. And by registering to vote, you are declaring, by virtue of doing that you consider yourself an Ohio resident. And if you're an Ohio resident, everybody who's an Ohio resident should play by the same set of rules. That's one thing I've been very consistent about as it relates to voting. So I don't see how this is different other than setting a time frame by which you have to do this. I don't have a position on that, whether it's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. But if you're an Ohio resident, you should play by the rules of being an Ohioan.
What could you explain? What's the requirement for out-of-state college students? They're allowed to vote in Ohio.
They're allowed to vote in Ohio.
And they've been allowed to vote without having Ohio driver's licenses.
And
by
they
the
still
fact that they're
will.
living. But by registering to vote and voting, they're potentially committing a criminal act under this amendment because they haven't gone and gotten a driver's license after 30 days. That's the connection, right?
For the purposes of voting, okay, nothing prohibits them from registering to vote and voting. What the obligations are as a resident of Ohio, that's in a completely different issue. That is in a completely different set of laws. But for someone to suggest that this provision makes it harder to vote is an absolutely false statement, because it does nothing to impact the means and the manner in which people register to vote in the state of Ohio. Nothing.
Something that was.
And as a matter of fact, I'll argue again that by having a driver's license, you actually make it easier for them to register to vote in Ohio. And you could just as easily make the argument that you will increase the number of registered voters in Ohio by having people go get driver's licenses.